So in my eyes, there are generally two different states or ways in which you can live. You can either live from a place of force, where you are forcing things in life to happen, and we'll go into exactly what this looks like a little bit later. Or you can live a life of flow, where things are easier, more effortless, and you don't have to worry about certain things that you may have at one point in time been worrying about, or maybe you're even worrying about right now. And the way these two states show up per person, the way these two states manifest are completely different. If you take someone who's living in a force-based way and just took a look at them next to someone who's living in a flow-based way, the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they think, the emotional states and levels of consciousness they entertain, the things that they're bringing into their life are going to be vastly different, where you can guess that the one who is moving more from force is attracting things in all realms, so mentally, spiritually, emotionally, energetically, physically, that are of more what we would consider negative, while the person who is living more in flow is attracting in all those areas more things that could be considered positive. One essentially allows you to tune into and align with what you actually are, more who you actually are, and tune into that flow of life, while the other, on the other end of the spectrum, pretty much limits you and kind of blocks this natural flow, this natural just kind of really beneficial energies from coming in. So in this video, I'm going to be going over how you can start inviting in more of an existence, more of a life of flow, and stop being in this forceful kind of way, being in this kind of life that invites in abundance and happiness and fulfillment, and move out of the one that really invites more struggle and strife and hardship and guilt and shame and similar emotions. I'm going to be going over how to more easily, powerfully, and effortlessly access your intuition, which plays a huge role in this. I'm also going to give you some practical tools you can use right away that are automatically going to help you to live more in that flow. And lastly, I'm going to go over what you can do when you find yourself veering off path, because a lot of the times when we start to try and live in this more flow-based way, because of your old patterns and old story and maybe forceful way of living in the past, you may revert back. And I'm going to give you some things to think about that help you essentially reorient and just step back onto the path of flow instead of kind of going into a spiral back down the path of force. So essentially how to reorient when you find yourself veering off track after you become aware of this and you start doing these practices. So first, I want to really bring light to the awareness of the difference between living in force and living in flow, because ultimately those are just words that can maybe give you a conceptual idea, but I want to go into it, make it a little more specific, make it a little more granular to really give you a picture of what I'm talking about here. Because obviously you probably are already aware that living in flow versus living in force are two vastly different realities that will create two vastly different levels of existence for whichever one you decide to entertain or live by. But I want to give you a description that makes this a lot easier to understand. We call this different levels of consciousness or states of consciousness, and there's three in particular I want to present to you, two that exist in the level of force, and the one we're going for that exists in the level of flow. And then that way you can more easily identify which one you're really engaging with and then shift if you need to. Now, the reason living in force, in my eyes, is not that desirable is because it goes against natural law, especially against laws like the law of balance, which we've talked about in this on this channel before. It goes against the law of the path of least resistance, which is how nature works. But a lot of times we resist things and make things more complicated, and we do it from the head instead of this thing that connects us to our intuition, or our intuition connects us to what we are, our heart, our soul, and we do it in that way, and it's why things take longer. We struggle. It's kind of like, if we're trying to get beyond a wall and we're like, the only thing to do is fight this wall. So I'm going to try and punch each brick out. Now, you might get beyond that wall eventually, But then life is like, if you just listened to me, I would have shown you how to go around the wall. Actually, there was a pathway under the wall. Actually, if you just, took a second and took 4 steps to the right, I'm going to go off screen for you. Oh, look, there's an opening. There's an opening right here that I wasn't aware of because I'm too busy, again, fighting life, trying to force things through instead of allowing this other thing to come in, this natural flow of life. There's also famous kind of saying that about the fly who keeps running into the window when the open window is right next to it, right? That force and using all this energy and continually doing the same thing that's not working isn't usually what's beneficial, where if it just paused and connected and took a moment, it would see that there's actually a wide open window right next to it. And so many of us do this in our daily lives in this forceful way. And so obviously it's vastly different than allowing the flow, which continually lets you see the open windows, the open doorways that make things much easier in your life, that shows you the path of least resistance. And I'm not talking about the path of least resistance from your ego. Again, we have to separate the ego versus the soul here, because the ego's path of least resistance ultimately in a long-term game is not the path of least resistance. It will bring more resistance, more pain, more suffering. But that's when the ego's like, hey, let's sit on the couch instead of doing that thing that's good for us, like going to the gym. That's not what I'm talking about when I say this. I'm saying that nature naturally will show you the path of least resistance towards certain things if you're listening, if you're paying attention, if you're in flow. That's why someone who's in flow, it seems that everything comes easy to them. It seems that they barely ever make a quote-unquote wrong move. It seems that things happen in less time. It seems that they're happy as they're doing it. Why? Because they're tuned into this. They're able to recognize the path of least resistance that brings them to where they want to go, or they embrace the unknown, and then life brings them these amazing things that need not take long. But if you're trying to punch each brick out of the wall, that's going to take a very long time. If you're trying to swim upstream, well, that's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of time. So let's go over what the differences between, again, flow and force are. And I want to give you what are called 3 states of consciousness. Now, the forceful states we categorize in 2 different ones, which is to me and by me. And I'll explain exactly what these mean. To me is the first one of a forceful way of living. And this is usually a more passive way of living, not in an observational passive way, which can be really good in certain cases, but more of a life happens to me. The kind of life passing me by, I'm waiting for life to do something before I do something, or life is even this bully that's out to get me. This is the victim mode consciousness. If we think of a river and that river represents life, the person who is in to me doesn't even engage with life, or does so does it in a very limited way. So they never even get into the river and see where life's trying to take them. Or if they somehow, really tentatively step into the river, they dip their toe in, maybe they accidentally fall in because life's trying to support them in some way, they're holding on to a rock, they're holding on to a branch, they're not going anywhere, they're staying in place, they're staying stagnant, and they're waiting for something to happen for them. Or, again, they're not being proactive and using the amazing power they actually have within them. Or, again, they see life as this bully and everyone else around them as a bully that's out to get them. Now, again, this is a state of being, so if you experience these emotions every now and then, that doesn't mean you're existing in to me. But if you are finding yourself in those a lot, it would, in my eyes, behoove you, it would really benefit you to learn how to elevate yourself from there. So that's the first one, to me, which is life happens to me. The second one is by me. Now, this is an upgraded level from to me. However, again, it's still in the forceful category, and you'll see why in just a second. So by me is life happens by me. And not by me in what I actually am, but by me as in my ego, my identity, who I see myself as, who I've been conditioned into, right? So this is the hustle and grind. So this person has jumped into the river. They're engaging with life, but they're typically fighting against it. This is the kind of person who, believes hustle, grind, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Life knocks me down, but I get right back up. I step into the ring with life. Life is hard and struggle. Usually someone in this mode comes from life is a struggle mentality, and so they see themselves fighting against life, fighting against the current of life. Like life, again, is this big baddie that's out to get them, that doesn't want the best for them. In fact, they're keeping the best things from life from them. This is the typical by me level of consciousness. Now, again, this is very forced. This is something that requires a lot of force, because guess what? If you want to fight against life, life will allow it. It allows you to choose whatever you want to choose, but it goes against natural laws and the natural flow. And so you're fighting against this natural flow. You're punching the bricks, and you're going to get through, but it's going to come at a cost. It's going to come with a ton of stress, most likely health issues. You know, in that example, probably your fists are all mangled up now. You know, it's going to come with a relationship breakdown. It's going to come with things like overinflated ego, like pride. It's going to come with anger. It's going to come with teeter-tottering between by me and to me as well, like coming back down the fear and then using by me to motivate yourself out of it, or guilt and shame and motivating yourself out of it. And once again, this is a higher level of consciousness and is preferable to me. However, it is still in this forceful place where things are going to seem even harder. It is going to seem like life is slapping you around, because life is trying to give you feedback to move you back into equilibrium, which is flow, to move you back into alignment with what you are, with where you come from, with who you actually are, which is again in the flow. So those are the states that are more forceful. Let's move on to the one that I would invite you to aim for, and the one I teach people how to get to through programs, through coaching, because it's such a more pleasurable way of living. It just brings in so much more, allows you to expand, allows you to grow in so many different ways. Because again, it's like if you have that brick there or the open window, and you're actually now aware of the open window. Life is showing it to you and you're working with life. So boom, open window, open doorway, open window, right? Brick wall. Oh, actually you can go to the left and then there's a little opening there, instead of fighting against it or passively sitting there never doing anything, right? So that's what through me kind of represents here. You're working co-creatively, cooperatively, cooperating with life at your back. And something Alan Watts says, when you flow with the river, I used to love this because it describes this so well, is when you let go and flow with the river and you stop trying to control things that, guess what, you can't actually control, which is why all this resistance and stress and so many things come in, because you're trying to control things that ultimately you cannot control. When you let go of those things, you do take responsibility for your part in the cooperation with the universe, your higher self, whatever you want to call it. You get to flow with the river and allow it to take you to all these beautiful places, all these things that your head does not know of, but your soul is drawn to. And what's amazing is when you start flowing with that, you have the full power of the river at your back, the full power of life, the full power of the flow of this current, right? As Alan Watts would say, when you follow the river or you just kind of float with it, the full power of the river is now at your back. And imagine how powerful that is when you are co-creating and cooperating. And so this state is called through me. And through me simply means life happens through me, or life works through me. It is cooperative. Life is bringing inspiration in. Life is showing you what that best next move is. And we'll get into some differentiating factors to how the more forceful living shows up and how it operates, and how through me operates. And one of the ways is it only show you basically the next move, the best next move. It's not going to show you 5 or 10 or 15 moves ahead. That is a game of the ego and the head, and of forceful living for the most part. Essentially, through me allows you to operate from the unknown and the non-linear way in which life works. You see, life is non-linear. It's not linear anywhere in nature. Anywhere in any other part of life, we try and make things linear from the head. Again, that's why we want a 5-step plan. We want, a 10-year look at this. We want to go, okay, first I do A, B, C, D, E, F. Through me and how life operates doesn't work in that way. It just goes, hey, here's the best next move for you. Oh, but why? Because that's what I'm pulled to. But why? It's not going to justify it. It is always just going to be something where you have to trust and go when you connect to that place. You have to trust that when you go around a bend in the river, the universe has your back. Your heart will never lead you astray. Your intuition will never lead you astray. And in my own experience and the experience of so many others I've spoken to or taught or peers of mine, they say the same thing, that their heart, their intuition has never led them astray. The flow has never led them to a bad place. It has always led them to more expansion, more awareness, more abundance. The thing about forceful living, the to me and by me states can only operate from the known. And when I say the known, I don't mean like all that we know as a race or anything like that. I mean all your mind knows, all your ego knows, which again may actually not even be quote unquote right or even helpful information, but the ego thinks it knows certain things and wants to build based on what it knows. And the problem with that is if you're trying to expand and grow, well, you can't grow or expand beyond what you already know. So you can't invite any new information in. You're not inviting any kind of revelation in or any ability for the unknown to come in and just benefit your life and bring in the magic that it can bring in. And so when it comes to By Me, when you get to a bend in the river, most people in By Me try and swim upstream. The To Me people jump out of the river or hold on to a rock, like I said. But the Through Me people, they lovingly embrace the bends in the river. They celebrate the bends in the river and trust the universe to take them where they need to go. Trust their higher self, their soul, to take them where they need to go. And for you, it's about following that impulse, that intuition, which we'll get into in a moment, of just whatever the best next move is. To Me and By Me really resists and goes against those principles in a way that brings the consequences that come about from people being in that state, the forceful state, which shows like stress, struggle, strife, fear, anxiety, all these things, which will manifest in specific ways as well in your life. Where Through Me will help you connect more to love and gratitude and abundance and similar emotions and states, which of course will bring the physical equivalent of those things into your life, and it will do it in non-linear ways. Okay, so that's the difference in awareness. Now let's very quickly go over accessing this state, accessing Through Me, because it's all well and good to know, okay, cool, that's the difference, and that makes sense, right? Okay, that's observably true, and you might have even noticed it in your own life, but how do you start accessing Through Me some more? So I'm going to give you a few different ideas really quick that I think are going to help you to digest this a little bit better and apply it more in your everyday life. And I'm of course going to give you some tools that are going to help you access your intuition, because again, you might be a little fearful or a little scared or apprehensive about this idea of the best next step and knowing nothing ahead of time and knowing like, well, how do I know what that step is? How do I access that? All these different things. So I'm going to give you ways in which you can do that more easily. But let's jump into, again, more of what's going to help you on this Through Me path and flow-based way of living. And just understand it will take a little bit of practice, right? If you've been living from a forceful place, that's what you've become used to. And you just have to practice this more and more each day, and you'll start getting used to this more. So the first thing I want to just say about your intuition or accessing Through Me is it's always been there available. It's never not been there. It's always been readily available for you to access it, but if you don't have the awareness of how to access it or you don't stumble upon it in some way, it's obviously something that you're not going to tune into. Love does not come in uninvited. It's one of my favorite sayings. You are a powerful being that has to invite these things in because life will allow you to choose whatever you choose. It does not impede upon your free will. It allows you to play out your life in the way you see fit, even if you've been conditioned to do it in a way that doesn't serve you. However, when you become aware of these things, understand it's always been there, readily available. Now, again, like I said, it might take you, you might not be able to connect to it as quick as maybe I can or someone else can who's been doing this for a while, where it can be more like that, right? Because we've been exercising the tools, or we know these awarenesses for a while and been applying them in our everyday lives. It's kind of like having a hose pipe that's kind of got a blockage, but as you continue giving it attention, continue running water through it, the blockages start to clear up, and eventually the water will start to come out and flow more naturally. So that's the first thing. Now, second is faith is required. And a lot of people, I don't think, understand what faith ultimately means, because people go, okay, well, I'll believe in this, I'll have faith in this when you show me the evidence of, right? But that's not what faith is. Faith is moving from that intuition, feeling that impulse, and going with it regardless of whatever justifications or everything else that's going around. And it's not faith without that. If you need all these things in place before you finally make the leap or jump, that's not faith. If you feel pulled toward doing this and you take the leap of faith, not knowing what's going to happen, that's what faith looks like. You can't know all the details. And like I said, the Through Me operates from the unknown. So you will never have all the information. At some point, you can try and gather as much information as you want, as many whatever you want, but at some point you have to take the leap, and it will always be from a place of not knowing exactly what's going to happen because you're not meant to know. The how is none of your business. And so understand that that is an inevitable part of this if you want to live in a flow-based way. And you can totally choose not to. You can totally choose to stay in the forceful way or choose these other ways and not let something else in that's going to guide you in beautiful ways. But to let something else in, to let this higher power in, to let this flow come in, you can't know exactly what's going to happen. You have to allow yourself to be guided. You have to have faith. You have to do the work and trust the process. It is your head, your ego, the thing that wants you to live in a more forceful way that needs a plan. It's not what you actually are. It's your head and ego that needs a plan and won't move without it. Now, if you find it helpful, you can still make plans, but again, you're still going to have to take the leap of faith at some level in some way for this to work. Now, speaking of that, you might say, well, what if I accidentally move back into force or I take a wrong turn? Understand again, this is a loving universe, unconditionally. It doesn't look at you as like a bad boy or girl or whatever if you make a wrong turn. And to think of the universe and your intuition and this guidance as more of a GPS. So what that means is, let's say you're going down the road in this example and the universe, your intuition's like, hey, the best next thing for you to do is go left. And let's say you don't listen to it, you get into your head comes in and justifies why you should go right, or continue to go right like you've always gone. And so you go through these pros and cons and blah, 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 you eventually go right. The universe doesn't go like, oh God, she went left, she went right again. What are we gonna do with it? Should we punish them? I think we should punish them. Like, they just gotta know, left is the way to go. How many times do I need to say it? When will I get it doesn't work that way. You know, again, we get used to kind of these authoritative figures in our life, maybe doing that from a young age. So we get conditioned into like, we're bad if we do that. All the universe is going to do, and this impulse is going to do when you do that, is go, okay, that's the choice they've made. Recalculating. Okay, coming up here, then make a left. And if you don't do it again, recalculating. It's indifferent. It's just going to continually giving you the best next move based on where you're at. Right? So even if you take 50 right turns, it'll still be accessible for you to take a left. Now, of course, if you take 50 right turns and you continually ignore your intuition, you know, it's going to take longer for you to be more in that flow as a more equilibrium. It's going to take longer for some of these things to come in because now you've gone so far back because you've taken all these turns that are against your intuition. But again, your intuition, life is not going to punish you for it. It's not going to say, you know what, I'm not going to give you any more direction anymore. You're on your own. No, it's always there. It doesn't think like us or have these conditions. It will continually recalculate and give you the best next move. So don't fret if you make a quote unquote wrong turn or you take a right when your intuition told you to take a left and then you realize you're like, oh no, doesn't matter. It'll just go recalculating and now you have a new choice to make. And fourth is just to recognize the reason why flow it feels so much better, why it brings about better results, it brings about abundance, it brings about fulfillment, it helps you expand and grow, is because it's tuned into the natural frequency of life. Now I'm holding a microphone here, so I can't really do this, but let's say, you know, when you're in force, here's the natural frequency of life, and here's where you are in force. So no wonder there's all this friction, because you're misaligned to that natural frequency of life. And so how can life bring you these amazing things, this abundance, all this different stuff, if that pipeline isn't formed properly? Certain things might trickle in to give you little previews and try and get you to course correct and all these different things. But when you align, and so you're here and let's say you come over here, now suddenly that pipeline is flowing and these things can flow in much more easily. Again, if you're flowing with the river, you're continually going further down the river while someone who's in to me or by me are swimming upstream or staying upstream. That means further down that river, again, into the unknown, that's probably stronger relationships. That's potentially more abundance. That's that dream job. That's moving to that country you always wanted to go to. That exists further down the river because you're now more on that natural frequency that life operates at. And when you're on the radio, again, I've given this analogy a lot, but if you're on the frequency, the same radio station that life is resonating on, what kind of songs, i.e. results or manifestations in your life are you going to get? Ones that are on that frequency. But if you're on a different frequency that's not that one, you can't get those things coming into your life, right? So understanding that the through me and flow-based way of living is on the frequency of life, of abundance, of these things. And life is naturally abundant. Life is naturally just miraculous. And you can be on that miracle frequency. But again, it has to be coming from this through me flow-based place. And also understand that when you're not on this frequency and you're on, say, a more forceful one, the reason like these so-called negative things come in is not to punish you. It's just to help you get back to your natural state on this frequency. It's meant to be a catalyst for you to find this again. It's meant to help nudge you in the right direction. So now I just want to give you some tools really quick that you can explore that I found are amazing at helping you get into the flow and through me. Now the first one is obvious, but it's meditation. If you're not meditating, it is one of the most beneficial tools that I know of to access the flow and tune into what you are. Because when you're meditating, you are taking your attention off the physical, off of where the mind and the ego operates in the known, and you are inviting in the unknown. And so much can happen when you're doing this, including, allowing the universe to come in and just take things that you no longer need to hold on to anymore, to release certain things, and also bring inspiration. I was meditating today, and just out of nowhere, an inspiration for another video that I'm going to make came through. And it was just that easy. Again, a lot of these ideas come through this. Most of these ideas that I come up with or come through, either it pops in because someone has a video and I want to make a similar one, or it pops in and an idea just comes out of nowhere. I don't sit down usually and think these things all the way through and go, that would be the best thing to do. Yes, A, B, C, D. Okay, cool. Then I should do this. No, it's usually how this works. I just go through my life flowing, and these ideas come to me. They come through me. Right? And that's just a small example in one area of life. But it happens to me in my health. It happens to me in my relationship. It happens to me in my finances. All of these different things, because I'm committed to being in that state as much as I possibly can. The meditation is an amazing one. And if you're not doing it, I really recommend you bring in that practice. And there's many different ways to meditate. And I would just say, find what works for you. Now, the second thing is grounding and being in nature. Again, nature is already attuned to that life frequency. Nature is already in that natural abundance. Nature is already flowing with life without any resistance whatsoever. And so the more you get into nature and you let it wash you over, the more you're going to be tuning into that flow more easily. Every morning I have a nice little area by the water here with some grass, and I'll do some grounding, and I'll read my book, usually out there, and then I'll meditate while also in nature. And this is like doubling down on these things. I get so deep into meditation when I'm actually out in nature doing it. I found it's just a huge difference. Next is just learning to pause in the moment. You have to understand that we have to, in a way, sometimes train ourselves to get out of our heads. We are perpetual overthinkers if we do not take care of this, just the way we're raised and the way, what we're told to value. But I want you just to get into, or I would invite you to get into, the habit of taking a deep breath or just pausing for a moment and just connecting with the moment. Again, just focusing on your breath or something similar throughout the day. This is going to give you a pause. This is going to give you the opportunity to even ask yourself some questions like, is what I'm doing right now flow-based, or am I doing something that I maybe don't need to do? Am I doing something forceful? But you need to kind of snap yourself out of it a little bit and take pause so you can get to that moment. Now, this next one's going to be so useful, because one of the biggest things that happens when you're in the forceful states is you start clinging on to a lot of ideas and energy that I like to call them energetic anchors that weigh you down. And so if you release those energetic anchors, you start to naturally float up. And so this is using letting go techniques. A lot of times, it's not that you need to add more things, it's that you need to release certain things that are keeping you in a certain state of mind or a certain energy that are causing you to live more from force. For example, you might have belief systems that make it really difficult for you to have faith or trust the universe. Well, that's an energetic anchor that's going to really hurt you if you want to live in a flow-based way. And so releasing that would be hugely beneficial instead of trying to, again, bring on all this new stuff. And so you may be holding on to a lot of different energetic anchors that are weighing you down. And so releasing those are going to go a long way to helping you be more in the flow. You can think of it like you're flowing on the river and all these anchors are keeping you from moving further downstream. Now, does that mean that you need to go out and do something? Does that mean you need to try and swim harder? Well, those anchors aren't going to let you move anywhere. But by releasing them, naturally you'll start to flow. Now, the two things I'm going to give you that are going to help you with this is the Ho'oponopono meditation technique. And this is basically a mantra that you'll repeat, but you can look up videos on this and do it as a guided thing. The next is to look at a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. This is the best book, or one of the best kind of just resources that I've ever seen on letting go, and I really would invite you to take a look at that book. It's very simple. He gives a technique in there, but if you really want to go deeper with this, Letting Go by David Hawkins, in my eyes, is the way to go. I'm going to give two more, and the next one is shifting your environment and especially removing the obvious drainers. Now, when I say your environment, I don't just mean your physical space. I mean your digital space. A lot of us have environments online. If you're, for example, tuning into social media all the time, that elicits a response from your head and ego and this forceful place, you're watching other people live forceful lives all the time, well, you're going to start getting drawn into that and influenced by that. And so you want to be very careful with your environment. In the same way, you can change your environment to be more around nature or get yourself into nature more, which is going to benefit you you, you can do that with your online environments and other environments who you hang out with, all this different stuff. Understand you will always be influenced by your environment, and environment beats will. And so I recommend you set up your environment to support you in your flow-based living and just do the best you can with whatever you're working with now. And the more you do this, the more opportunity you will be given to make it even more and more coherent and easier. And the last one I want to give you is finding your tens. Now, what this means is finding the things that light your heart up and writing them down and having a list of those things. Now, when I say tens, I mean 10 out of 10. Not 9, not 8, not 7, 10 out of 10. Something you know lights you up. I'll give you some examples. Again, the nature one. I love going out into nature and just grounding and doing my meditation. So meditation would be another one. I love playing a certain sport, and so it's not always a 10 out of 10, but I'll feel out for when it is, and I'll go do that. I love working out, same deal, right? Reading a certain book. And so just finding these activities. Sometimes it could be just, again, I always mention the nature, but I have water out there. I'll just look at the water. And that's a 10 out of 10 for me. Singing and dancing will a lot of times be a 10 out of 10 for me. Now, what are you doing when you're doing this is you're accessing your heart. You're not worried about what you're going to get from it or what you need to do with it, 5 moves ahead. You're just like, oh, in the moment, I want to do something that I enjoy and connect to. And that opens up, again, your intuition. That opens you up to flow. It gives you better access to it because the more heart-based activities you do, the more you're in that flow, the more your intuition, inspiration, the through me can come through. And lastly, what I want to give you is called reorientation, because you may find, like I said, that you're doing this and it's going well, and then there's a bump in the road and maybe you go back to forceful living. So first and foremost, not to feel guilt or shame about this. Again, the universe is not an overbearing parent. The universe truly does love you unconditionally. It will recalculate. It will just give you the best next move again, and it's letting you live your life in the ways you see fit and making you, allowing you to make your own choices, right? So just to relax, relax into this and understand that it's not this thing to put all this importance on. In fact, when you lower the importance, that's when you allow results to come in. Putting all this importance on something just puts excess potential on it, which makes it, if you watch my video on the law of balance, then life has to kind of balance it out in a way that's usually not favorable for you. So just relax when it comes to that. If you find yourself, again, in the forceful place, see if you can just gently reorient, and don't worry if you're not able to do it fully at first. Again, honor where you're at. A first grader is no better or worse than the fifth grader, and how ridiculous would it be if we said, hey, first grader, you suck because you're not in fifth grade. They're just where they're at. They're not better or worse. They just have to graduate first grade to get the second, to third, to fourth, and it's the same in your spiritual growth. When you graduate and you get the lesson, you will move on to the next stage. And these are just some tools and things I've given you to help you do that. Now, one other thing that's really going to sabotage you if you don't get a handle on it is your subconscious mind and those patterns. Now, again, I don't want to dive into that in this video. It's already a fairly long video it's packed full of great stuff, but I want to give you this next video if you're interested in learning how to fully reprogram your subconscious. Because again, it will try and sabotage you. It will do all these things just because of the patterns it has when you try and shift and move more into flow. And so knowing how to recalibrate it, to reprogram it, is a crucial skill to have, or crucial activity to do, so that it supports you on your journey versus getting in your way or trying to sabotage you. So you can go watch that video over here. Again, it is a deep dive. I warn you, it's for those who are